so this brings us right up to Trudeau in Canada, because the truckers are against not only the mandate, but they're against the vaccine passports that track you everywhere for the rest of your life, and then they know where the government knows where you are before you get there. And so why don't the mandates make any sense? Because mandates, right now, we know if you get a vaccine, it's to help yourself. If you wear a mask, it's... And so, because he says you're going to get it. Fauci now, everyone agrees, the head of the FDA. What we've been reporting since last summer at our show is that everyone's going to get COVID. We've been reporting that. You know why? Because that's the fucking fact. And now they're finally saying it. Here he is saying just about everybody will get infected with COVID due to Omicron. You are likely, no matter what you do, who you are, where you are likely to get COVID anyway. Likely. Everyone. Just about everybody's going to get it. So this mandate that's supposed to protect other people doesn't make sense. There's no logic to it. You can say there is, there isn't. And here's what, so in order to get rid of this trucker protest, now this is what Trudeau has done. He's invoked emergency powers as if they're under war, as if someone invaded them.
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupations.
And so he's now freezing the bank accounts of the truckers. He's canceling their insurance on their trucks. Yeah, that's what they're doing. All kinds of crazy stuff you would do to terrorists, not your own citizens who have a protest. But here, I said this yesterday, I'll say it again. If they can deem protesters terrorists so they can freeze their bank accounts to squash the protest, then they can and will do it to you or to Black Lives Matter or any time a protest actually starts working. That Black Lives Matter didn't work. In case you didn't notice, Black Lives Matter never came close to working. They didn't defund shit. They refunded the cops. And now everybody on every news show is talking about how they need more cops. So, Black Lives, or any protest, they can shut it down. This is what people thought Trump was going to do. But now Democrats are actually cheering on his authoritarianism. So this is what Justin Trudeau used to say. He used to say when a government starts trying to cancel dissent or avoid dissent is when it's rapidly losing its moral authority to govern. That's what he used to say. Until there was actually an organized, effective protest against him. And then he's like, they're all terrorist Nazis. You think I'm kidding? Watch this. Now, this is a Jewish member of parliament in Canada. And watch this.
Optimistic, hopeful vision for public life isn't a naive dream. It could be a powerful force for change. If Canadians are to trust their government needs to trust Canadians. Those are the words of the Prime Minister in 2015. These people, very often misogynistic, racist, women haters, science deniers, the fringe. Same Prime Minister 6 years later as he fans the flames of an unjustified national emergency. So, Mr. Speaker, when did the Prime Minister lose his way? When did it happen?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Conservative Party members can stand with people who wave swastikas. They can stand with people who wave the Confederate flag. We will choose to stand with Canadians who deserve to be able to get to their jobs, who be able to get their lives back. These illegal protests need to stop, and they will, Mr. Speaker.
So Justin Trudeau just accused conservatives of standing with the person who waved a swastika flag. He accused a massive crowd of people of being with that one guy in that one video. And how much you want to bet that one swastika guy in the video I saw was a fake plant? Because I don't believe Canada is actually filled with Nazis. And I also don't believe the protesters are standing with Nazis. But hey, maybe I don't know what Nazis are. So he just told that woman, that MP in Parliament, that she's standing with people with swastikas. Now, unfortunate for him that that woman actually is Jewish. And she said, I think the Prime Minister should think long and hard about his own history before singling out a Jewish member of Parliament and falsely accusing me of standing with a swastika. What a disgraceful statement, unbecoming of anyone in public office. He owes me an apology. Well, she is Jewish. Hey, you could stand with the swastika people if you want, Jewish lady, but I'll be over here with the rich people in full blackface. How about that? Geez, Justin, why don't you just come out and call her a hoser? You know you want to. Just call her a I'm standing on the right side of history. I mean, history starting from after my last blackface performance, sometime in the late 90s. Is she suggesting that Canadians' emergency powers weren't meant to be authorized in the event of a loud, sustained honking? Because it does sound like most Canadians, that sounds like the most of a Canadian emergency I've ever heard. That's amazing. By the way, Justin Trudeau, he's saying that woman stands with people with the swastika. Well, oh, son of a bitch. Here's Mr. Blackface himself, Justin Trudeau. Conservative Party members can stand with people who have swastikas. They can stand with people who have waved the Confederate flag. Uh-oh. Here it is. Who's he standing with? He's standing with Andrew Parubi. And let's see a picture of him in his Nazi outfit. There he is.
Wow.
It's Andrew Parubi speaking at a rally in his Nazi-style uniform. Hey, Justin, not only that, Justin Trudeau just armed a bunch of Nazis. I don't know if you know this, but I think our camera off? Is that actually being cut, you think, from the live feed?
Yeah, hold on.
Is it being cut from the live feed? Because that's fucked up. There you go. Wow, nice going. Okay. Wow. It says Canadian officials under fire after meeting with Ukrainian battalion unit linked to neo-Nazis. What? I'll read it again. Canadian officials under fire after meeting with Ukrainian battalion unit linked to neo-Nazis. That's from November 19th. Canada is sending lethal aid to Ukraine amid Russian invasion threat, says Trudeau. And where's it going? Where's that aid going? Turns out it's going to Nazis. You think I'm kidding? Okay. In the case of Ukraine, Canadian equipment has already been found with the volunteer battalions, whose integration into the National Guard makes it all the more difficult to track weapons use. According to Ivan Kachansky, Azov, which is that neo-Nazi organization, Azov got several Spartan armored personnel carriers, which were produced in Ukraine under a Canadian license. Ukrainian officials have also recently discovered a weapons cache at what was alleged to be a volunteer battalion base. So, Kraz Spartan armored vehicle with Azov banners. So, Azov, that's like the Nazi insignia. So these are Canadian vehicles with Nazi insignia that's coming from Justin Trudeau. That's what's happening. Who's standing with people with of course, the guy who did blackface and the guy who also now he's the guy also then went along and stood with people who are Nazis, is now funding them. And of course, what does he do when he gets in a political tight spot? He accuses his opponents of doing everything he's done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I never thought I'd see Justin Trudeau accuse a Jewish MP of standing with swastikas. Next thing you know, he's probably going to come out and say that the truckers hate him because he's black.
I think he said the truckers just want to date him. I think that's it. So here's what Justin Trudeau said about the truckers.
The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing.
Unacceptable views. To me, that sounds like Hitler. That's the kind of shit that Pol Pot would say. That's the kind of shit you would think Idi Amin would say. That's not something that a liberal head of a democracy would say. Your views are unacceptable. That sounds like Orwellian shit, man. That sounds like Aldous Huxley, Orwellian. That sounds like get out of Dodge. We are going to control your thoughts. They're committing thought crimes. So here's Michael Tracy caught this. Michael Tracy says, in its formal explanation for why the Emergencies Act was invoked in Canada, the Canadian government explicitly claims the emergency derives from the perceived ideological composition of the protesters. So how do you say this is an emergency? You have to show evidence that it's an emergency. And what the Canadian government is doing is they're saying that the emergency derives from the perceived ideological composition of the protesters. Trudeau purports to be confronting enemies of the civilization on behalf of the entire West. You think I'm kidding? I'll show it to you. Here it is. I'll read it to you if you can't see it. It says the protests have become a rallying point for anti-government and anti-authority, anti-vaccination, conspiracy theory, and white supremacist groups throughout Canada and other Western countries. The protesters have varying ideological grievances with demands ranging from an end to public health. So that's what that is. So the emergency is because these people have views I don't like. And we're going to have to stop these views on behalf of fucking of all Western Canada and all Western countries. That's pretty wild.
At the end of the day, they are cracking down on these protesters, and many liberals, both in the U.S. and Canada, are supporting this because those protesters threaten capital. As Richard Wolff explained on your show, this is a workers' rights issue. It's about intolerable working conditions for these truckers, which, by the way, they don't ever mention this, but over 60% of the Canadian trucking population is Punjabi. They don't mention that. But that's what it's about. And, they're going to, the reason why you're seeing these mandates being dropped in the U.S. now is because I think U.S. leaders are very worried about the U.S. Freedom Convoy and the prospects of that.
It's coming. It's coming. There's a convoy coming to the United States, and it's coming in early March. And
it's starting in India. And did you see that there was a Facebook page for it? It got 130,000 members. Crazy.
So
crazy.
I'm going to be there. It's going to start out by Coachella. And
I'm going to go to it.
I'm sure you're going to be there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to be there. So I just want to let you know how things are crumbling. A good protest makes the establishment crumble. When Justin Trudeau used the Emergency Act, that wasn't a show of strength. That was a show of desperation. Because it ain't going to end well. And do you remember this guy? This guy's the police chief in Ottawa. Do you know that's right? Do you remember when he was coming out talking tough? I said when he gave this is because they're afraid. And he come out and he's yelling about cops. He's threatening other cops. You better not help these truckers, or we will. Well, here's what he says:
there is no facilitation of food, water, fuel, logistics, or funding by any member of this police service or any other police service that I am aware of. Let me repeat. There is no supply of food, water, fuel, logistics, or anything else that relates to enabling this demonstration by any member of the Ottawa Police Service or any other police service that I am aware of. Should that information come to me, you can be clear, as Chief of Police in this service, I will conduct a full investigation. I will use the full extent of the Police Service Act and, if relevant, the Criminal Code to pursue charges against such a member who would do that.
So there he is threatening other cops. So that's how it started. How's it going? Ottawa Police Chief Peter Slowly resigns amid Canada's Freedom Cup. That's how it started. He was threatening other cops. How's it going? He had to fucking leave. He lost his job. So they're all melting down. And Justin Trudeau knows this is bad. And it's catching on. It's catching on all around the world. Australia. I heard it was even in Israel. France.
New Zealand.
There you go. It's coming to America. Dun, dun.
The craziest thing about this all, though, is that, in the United States during the Black Lives Matter protests, you had tons of violence associated with these protests. Many peaceful ones, too. But you had burning down of businesses, violence, looting of stores, riots in the streets. And they didn't ever freeze people's bank accounts or seize GoFundMe campaign funds over those protests. But now you got a bunch of people honking their trunk horns and bringing food to protesters. And that qualifies now, I guess, as terrorism.
Now that's terrorism. So why do you think they didn't do that to the Black Lives Matter protesters? Well, they were hoping that Trump would do that. They were hoping. So now a lot of people think that, the establishment was involved in those riots in order to make Trump look bad, hoping he would overreach, and then they could call him, do what Justin Trudeau's doing. They were hoping he would do that, freeze their bank accounts, call them terrorists, do stuff like that. He didn't, but that's what they were hoping for. And now Justin Trudeau's doing it, and they're all cheering it on. So it's not going well for the establishment when the police chief has to resign and they have to pretend they're at war, and then they have to smear every one of his political enemies as doing the exact same. So Justin Trudeau's the guy who stands with Nazis. Justin Trudeau's the guy who funds Nazis. Justin Trudeau's the guy who wore blackface in his college days. I'm sorry, not when he was a college student, when he was a college professor. Justin Trudeau is everything he claims these protesters are. And Justin Trudeau is an enemy of the people and Canada and a tool of his corporate masters. And it's not going well. Things are falling apart. He's accusing Jewish people of standing with Nazis while he's the one actually funding them and standing with them.
And he's tripled vax and has COVID.
And he's triple vax and he has COVID. So now tell me about how your mandate makes sense. Because now Justin Trudeau, if he has COVID, he can also infect other people. He's also going to shed the virus. He's going to have just as big a viral load in his nose.
Watch your mouth.
As somebody who's unvaccinated. But then they say, no, but they get better faster than the unvaccinated, so then they shed it for less time, so then they're less contagious. So you have to keep that in mind. Even though Fauci says you're only contagious after 5 days, you can go out again. You don't have to get a test or anything. Right? You know that, right? In Ottawa, some truckers appeared to harden their stance in response to Trudeau's decision to invoke the Emergency Act. The AFP news agency reported that some were moving big rigs into positions that could be more difficult to dislodge and posted signs on their vehicles that read, "Hold the line." Truckers are not going anywhere, Tyler, who gave only his first name, told AFP while sitting at the wheel of a massive truck parked outside Parliament. "We're not leaving. We dug in this long," said Gord, a cross-border truck driver from the central province of Manitoba, also told Reuters, declining to give his last name. So there's a lot at stake here. And, you know, our ability to protest is at stake. So if we all just sit there and allow the governments to do this to those truckers, freeze their assets, cancel their car insurance, and declare them terrorists and cut off their money supply, they can do that to anybody, and they will. So if you want to get health care, they'll do it to you. You want to get a living wage, they'll do it to you. You want to end the war, they'll throw you in jail and do it to you. So again, this is, the dumb left. The left that now I was used to be accused of leading the dumb left, which I think meant that people who listened to me were suckers, even though everything we've said at this show has turned out to be 100% true, including Russiagate, including Venezuela, including Syria, including everything we've said about COVID. You're going to get it. We've been saying that since last fucking summer. You're likely going to get it. And now everybody's catching up with us.
Yeah,
so,
I think the most damning point of all when it comes to how Trudeau has handled this, and the sense that this is not about the health and safety of Canadians, what he's doing with this Emergency Act, is that not only are they seizing bank accounts, not only are they using it to try and go after crypto funding of the protests, but they're also going to be using the Emergencies Act to deny Canadians health care.
No kidding.
Yep. They're going to deny them health care.
That seems like
How can
a
you
war
say
crime.
this is about health when you're going to deny someone health care?
That sounds like that should be a crime. You can't deny if you're in war, you can't deny your enemy health care if you capture them.
But Jimmy, they have bad thoughts.
Wow. Hey, we're doing live stand-up comedy in Philadelphia on February 20th. We just added a second show. And February 26th, back here in Los Angeles, go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all the tickets for all our live shows.